Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode. I do like a lens with a short minimum focus distance, and they don't come much shorter than these kinds of lenses. This is a macro lens. We're going to look at two of them today. We've got one from Olympus, and that's the 50mm f3.5 macro, and we've got a very similar lens from Pentax, and that's the 50mm f4 macro. We're also going to have a look at an adapter that we can use to look at small things. Let's show it to you on here. And what we've got on the end of this lens is a reversing ring, and this allows you to actually mount a lens in the opposite direction to the way it would usually be mounted, and so that's another way into photographing small things. So without further ado, let's look at the Olympus lens. This is one of the later Zuiko lenses. I think it's from around about, focus please, not on me. There we go. I think this lens is from around about 1984. Early 80s, but it's not one of the earliest Zuiko lenses. It's, like all the Zuiko lenses, a very, very beautifully made, beautiful looking thing, and I really do love, one thing I love very much about these Zuiko lenses is the way Olympus put together their aesthetics and the importance aesthetics had to them. And so what we end up with is lenses that really do look fantastic, and this one's no exception. It's a very beautifully made thing, and I seem to have got rather lucky with this one in that it doesn't seem to have been used an awful lot. It's still got its original sticker on there. There are no scratches or bumps or other little signs of wear. It really is in absolutely outstanding condition. It's incredibly sharp. It's sharper, I think, than my gold standard for sharpness, the Carl Zeiss Jena Pancolar. I think it might be it's possibly the sharpest lens I've ever shot with. It's very difficult to put a hair between it and the Pentax lens, but certainly this is one of the sharpest lenses I've ever shot with. It's sharper than the Jena Pancolar. It's an incredibly sharp lens, and it reveals massive amounts of detail. If you like sharp lenses, this is one you can cut yourself with. It's just stunning. It's an incredibly sharp lens, and it gets even sharper if you stop down. Why would you want to stop down an f3.5 lens? It's not very wide anyway. Well, the answer is that when you're shooting at closer distances, you have almost no depth of field. If you're shooting at the minimum focus distance of 23 centimeters, you're going to have almost no depth of field. Now, Zuiko lenses are well known for their extraordinary colour rendition, and this one is no exception. In fact, I think this one's a little bit nicer than most I've tried, actually, and that's possibly helped by the fact that it's in such nice condition. There's not been any opportunity for any form at all of imperfections to develop on the lenses, and these lenses are now 30, 40, 50 years old, so they are, some of them, beginning to show their age. But this one is absolutely beautiful colours, really quite outstanding even for a Zuiko lens. I've had a great deal of fun with this lens. It's absolutely fantastic for macro and for small objects. It's a great street lens, and I really like it as well for just general everyday photography. It's beautifully made, it looks fantastic, it's just a really, really nice piece of kit. Now, as for cost, these go generally for, according to eBay prices that I've seen, around about £80 to £100 for a nice one. However, you don't have to pay that. As I've often said, patience is the key to these things. There are bargains still out there, and you will find them with perseverance and with patience. What I advise against is paying buy it now prices, which are often a little bit inflated and not the true market value. And if you want to take a risk, if you're prepared to take a little bit of a risk, then that can pay off, as indeed happened with my purchase. I bought this lens, this camera, and the lens that's on this one for £110 all told. I did take a risk. I didn't know whether they were going to be any good or not. As it turns out, they are, but if they weren't, I could have sent them back. So taking a bit of a risk can sometimes pay off, as it has in this case. So let's look now at our second lens, and that's the Pentax lens. And this is a very similar lens to the Olympus, at least in terms of specification. It's a 50mm lens. Let's have a look on here. Focus, please. There we go. So it's a 50mm lens. It's got a very similar, very deep well, and the front element is far down inside the lens, and again that protects it from physical damage and from any sort of flaring. It's very resistant to flaring and losing contrast. It's a very, very beautifully made lens. It has an f4 aperture, so it has slightly less blur than the Olympus, although that's not too important. There's plenty of blur at minimum focus distance, which is similar to the Olympus. In fact, it's slightly less than the Olympus. This lens goes down to 20 centimeters, and you can see the little mark on there. It's got the 2 there to signify 20 centimeters, and that's also shown again on the focus scale at this point. Again, it's very, very beautifully made. The build quality of Pentax lenses is legendary. There is absolutely no play in any of this mechanism at all. The focus ring is absolutely precise. The aperture ring is absolutely precise. There is no play whatsoever. Everything is tight and very, very nicely made. And again, I don't think this lens has had too much use, in much the same way as the Olympus. Actually, this lens seems to have been very little used throughout its life. It's still in outstanding condition, and it's a very, very nice example of this particular lens. Like the Olympus, it's great for close-up shots, and it's also great for everyday photography as well. Street photography and general day-to-day photography. It doesn't have too much blur, but then you don't need too much blur on the street, and just like the Olympus, it can provide some separation if you stay reasonably close to your subject. A very, very nice little piece of kit. It's extremely sharp, again like the Olympus, and it's very hard to decide which is the sharper. I think the Olympus might be slightly sharper. They're both sharper than the CZJ Pancolar, which is really an achievement because that's one of the sharpest vintage lenses. In fact, it's the sharpest vintage lens apart from these two that I've used. It has very, very nice colour, but to my eye it's not quite as nice as the Olympus. This has the Takamar signature look to its colours, and it's very unique. It's a unique look that only Pentax lenses, I've found so far anyway, only Pentax lenses have. It's a look that has body and depth and strength, but it's not quite as intense. The colours don't quite pop as much. Instead, they have a slightly more pastel-y feel. It's a subjective thing, of course, but I do slightly prefer the colours from the Olympus. So this is really a very beautiful little lens. And as regards prices, well, they seem to go for roughly similar prices to what the Olympus version goes for. That is around about £80 to £100. But as with all vintage lens purchases, patience pays off. I bought this lens about a year ago with a couple of other Takumar lenses, a 135 3.5, and I think it was a 28mm. I think it was a 28 Takumar that I got as well. And for those three lenses, I paid £100, which means that I paid for this lens around about £30 or £40 if you break it down. Now those three lenses have been on eBay for about 3 months. I'd been watching them, nobody seemed to want them. They weren't terribly well photographed, but I couldn't see anything particularly wrong with them, and the description didn't say there was anything wrong with them either. So I bought them and they were all in really nice condition. So please remember, don't pay by it now prices unless you're really stuck. They're usually rather inflated. As always, patience pays off. Finally today we're going to have a look at a little gadget that turns any lens, or any lens that will fit the threads anyway, into a macro lens by reversing it, by flipping it around. And these are reversing rings. I'll just show you one here. Let's have a little bit of focus, shall we please? That's it. So the reversing rings here, you can see, are fitted onto the front filter of this lens. So what we've got here is a 49mm thread on this end and an M42 thread on this end. So we screw that into the lens at the front there. So that goes onto the front of the lens, and then we get either our M42 adapter if we're shooting on digital, or our M42 camera if we're shooting on film in the good old-fashioned way, and we simply mount that onto the camera or the adapter like this. And we've then got our macro lens, and this really does turn particular lenses into very powerful macro lenses. You can see that lens is now completely reversed as to the ordinary way it would be used. Now this arrangement, this setup, a setup like this, will really take us close into the subject. It works best with wide lenses, and if you think about it, that makes sense. If you mount this 28mm lens on the camera the right way round, it brings a very wide field of view into the camera and onto the film or sensor. Well, now if you turn it round, it does the exact opposite. And this little 28mm lens is a Pentax K f2.8 28mm. This little lens takes us far closer than either of these dedicated macro lenses do. Of course, the downside is that you can't focus to infinity. All you have is a macro lens that will give you macro shots, but in that regard, it's a really good thing. These adapters are cheap. If you don't mind that you can't focus to infinity, if you just want a way of photographing close up in macro, this adapter cost me around about, I think it was £15, £20, something like that, and it will work for a very wide array of lenses. Any lens that has a 49mm filter on the front will work with this lens, and of course you can get reversing rings for different lens ring sizes. You don't have to get a 49mm, you can get them in other sizes too. You can pretty much get any combination of filter size and mount that you want. So this is a very, very versatile system if you want to do some macro photography and you don't mind the fact that you can only photograph at macro lengths with a setup like this. It does give good optical quality. I wasn't really sure what optical quality it would give. Lenses are not meant to be used this way around. They're not designed to be used this way around. So I was prepared to have some sort of optical flaws, but it doesn't seem to give any. It seems really nice, actually. And I tried it on a few other lenses. I tried it on the Carl Zeiss Geneflectagon 2.4. That's a 35mm, so that gives a nice macro of around about, I would guess, around about 1:1. So this is a really successful way of photographing small objects. Again, if you don't mind that you can't focus to infinity, it's a good, cheap solution. So there we are, two beautiful little macro lenses, both available from around £80 to £100 or thereabouts, and significantly cheaper if you use a little patience and a little perseverance in your purchasing. We've also looked at this fantastic little adapter. This is a really great way to make high magnification images for not very much cost, and I've had a lot of fun shooting the images for this video and using these two little lenses and the adapter. So that's it from me for now. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and ring that bell before you go. And if you like the content on this channel and you'd like to help the channel grow and develop, you can do that at patreon.com/Zenography. As ever, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time for some more Zenography.